Okay, today we're actually going to do two lessons, 11.1 and 11.2. I'm going to go over the basics because there's a few different ways I can explain this. So I'm going to start with the easiest way, and then in class tomorrow you all are going to tell me if what we're doing makes sense or maybe if I need to explain it another way. So we're just going to do the basics in our video. So some things that I want you to recognize. This right here is called the square root. And normally when you think of squared, you think of like x squared, which we know means x times x. Square root is the inverse of that, so we're kind of thinking opposite. And one thing they don't write in square roots is a little 2. So I want you to remember that 2 means we have to have pairs, right? When we break down, we have to have pairs to pull out whole numbers. So that's what I'm going to write down, to pull out whole numbers. And the reason that is because another way to write the square root of x, so I'm going to kind of write that down here, is to say x to the 1/2 power. So because we do that, think about how many halves does it take to make a whole. Well, you need 2 of them, so that's why we have to have pairs to pull out whole numbers. If we kind of keep that same pattern going, the cube root of x could be written as x to the 1/3 power. And how many thirds do you need to make a whole? You need 3. So you could say to the 1/3 power, we need 3 to make a whole. All right, keep this same pattern going. If the square root of x is x to the 1/2, and the cube root of x is x to the 1/3, then we call this the fifth root of x, and to write it, we call it x to the 1/5. And I bet you could tell me how many do we need to make a whole. We're going to need 5 to make a whole. The last thing that you're going to see, so this has got two things going on at the same time. The fifth, we already know, means x to the 1/5, but because it's squared, we already have 2 of those. So instead of 1/5, this is really 2/5. So then the biggest note that you want to take here, so you should have all of this written down, but I would make a note that the bottom number is the root and the top number is the power or the exponent. That may be an easier way for you to think about that. So let's see what this looks like in application. Okay, so on examples like this, they're going to want us to just make sure we know how to go back and forth between the two. So remember, my bottom number is my, not my power, my bottom number is my root, and the top number is my power. So that means this could be rewritten as the fourth root of 16xy all to the 3rd power. If we were going to simplify that at all, we could simplify the 16, but for now, I just want you to leave it like that. Another way to write that, I'll write it in green. Sometimes they'll say the fourth root of 16xy, and they may put the 3rd like on the outside. Either way is going to work. I think that you're going to like to put the root on the power on the inside, but you all can tell me tomorrow what you think is going to make more sense. So in this example, at the bottom, they're just going backwards. They want me to write it with a fractional exponent. So here, remember the root goes on the bottom. So this means I have 2xy. It's to the 5th power, but it's the 3rd root, so that's to the 5/3 power. Again, we're going to talk about how to break that down and kind of simplify that here in just a minute. So make sure you understand that the bottom is where the root is, the top is where the power is. Okay, so here's our 11.2 section, simplifying radical expressions. So to simplify, it's going to be easiest to use rational exponents. So take a second to see if you can rewrite this example that I've given you with a fraction. That's what it means to use rational exponents, is to write them with fractional exponents instead of keeping the root on there. So pause and try to rewrite that one. And you should have gotten x to the 2/3 power. And then I just want us to remember our exponent rules from last year, from Algebra 1. So a to the 5th times a to the 2nd, that's like saying I've got 5 A's and 2 A's, which is altogether 7. So this is A to the 7th. So we're going to say our shortcut here is when we multiply by adding exponents. Similarly, when we divide, so think about the opposite of that, and when we divide, we're going to subtract exponents. So this is going to be A to the 3rd. So to divide, we're going to divide by subtracting exponents. This is just a review. This is all stuff you learned in Algebra 1. And then when we raise powers to powers, so that means like I've got the 5th to the 2nd. We used to talk about how that meant we had 2 sets of parentheses, one with A to the 5th and another with A to the 5th. But the shortcut there, if you count all that together, that's 10. The shortcut is just to multiply. So this is A to the 10th. So we can say our shortcut here is to multiply powers. All right, so let's look at this in action. I lied to you. We're going to look at that in action tomorrow. The last thing I want you to recognize, so this is what I was kind of saying at the very beginning, is how we break down nth roots. So, for example, on this first one, this is the square root. Even though there's nothing written up here, the little number in the corner is really a 2, which tells me I need to have 2 things to pull out whole numbers. So if we break down 16, I've got 4 and 4, 2, 2, 2 and 2. Now some of you should see shortcuts here, but I'm going to go all the way to the end. This means I've got the square root of 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. I need to pull out some whole numbers. I can do that in pairs, so I've got one whole number that can come out to the front, another whole number that can come out to the front. So this is really the whole number 2 times the whole number 2, which is 4. All right, that's why the square root of 16 is 4. Now if we do cube root, so I'll change colors. When I break 16 down, it's going to be the same, but this time, think about how many 2's or any number am I going to need to pull out a whole number, and that means I'm going to need 3. So I've got these 3 that pull out to make one whole number 2 and a 2 left over. So here my answer is going to be 2, the square root of 2. Right, these 3 made my whole number 2. This 2 is left, and actually it's not a square root of 2, it's a cube root of 2. It's left in there because it needs 3 other things to make a whole. All right, and then last one, when we compare that to doing, let's see, the 4th root back here, if we do the 4th root, so same breakdown. 16 still breaks down the same way, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. But now, if I think about my root out here, I need 4 to make a whole number. So all 4 of these have to be joined together to make a whole number. So this is, the 4th root of 16 is just the whole number 2. Nothing left on the inside and nothing bigger. All right, so you need those basics, and then tomorrow when we come to class, we're going to use those to kind of do some more. They're going to look complicated, but if you got the basics, you're going to be okay.